What happens when America's sweetheart walks into a studio glowing with holiday warmth, and discovers the temperature has already dropped below freezing? This wasn't supposed to be explosive. There were no raised fists. No shouting matches planned. No dramatic walk-off scheduled in the rundown. It was meant to be safe. Cheerful. Predictable. But sometimes the most unforgettable battles aren't fought with noise. They're fought with composure. With restraint. With a smile that refuses to crack under pressure. That winter morning, the studio of The View looked like something out of a postcard. Golden lights shimmered across polished floors. Wreaths hung perfectly centered in tall glass windows. Candles flickered behind the curved desk, casting a soft glow that felt almost sacred. The air carried that faint mix of pine and warm electrical heat from studio lamps that had been on since dawn. Everything about the set whispered comfort. And then Dolly Parton stepped into it. The applause began before she even reached her seat. It wasn't polite applause. It was affectionate. The kind reserved for someone who feels less like a celebrity and more like family. Her black sequined outfit caught the light without screaming for attention. It shimmered gently, controlled. Her blonde hair framed her face softer than usual, styled with intention but not theatrical excess. She waved the way she always does, open palm, warm smile, hand briefly resting over her heart. There is something disarming about Dolly's presence. She doesn't command attention. She receives it. Joy Behar was already watching her. Not smiling. Not scowling. Just watching. Chin slightly lifted. Eyes sharp. Measuring. Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward in her chair, hands folded loosely, ready to guide the segment. Her voice boomed with practiced warmth. Please welcome the one and only Dolly Parton. The cheers swelled again. Dolly sat down gently, smoothing her sleeves before resting her hands neatly on the glass table. Two View mugs sat between her and Joy like quiet ceramic boundaries. Invisible lines drawn before the first question had even been asked. Thank you for having me, Dolly said, voice soft and unmistakable. It's good to be here. Her tone carried that familiar Tennessee warmth. The audience melted immediately. You could feel it. A collective exhale. The first few minutes unfolded exactly as planned. Whoopi asked about Dolly's upcoming music projects. A co-host praised her songwriting legacy. Another mentioned her acting career. Laughter flowed easily. Dolly answered with humility, never lingering too long on praise. Never elevating herself above the room. When someone brought up her imagination library, her eyes softened. Books saved me before fame ever did anything for me, she said gently. A child with a book is a child with a future. Applause filled the studio again, genuine this time. Not the cue card kind. For a brief stretch, the holiday set felt whole. And then Joy leaned forward. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was deliberate. Her posture tightened. Her mug slid slightly to the side. Her head tilted in a way that signaled a shift, like a chess player touching a piece before moving it. So, Dolly, Joy began casually, though something colder lingered beneath the tone. You've been doing this a long time. Dolly smiled. I have. Yes. Decades, Joy continued slowly. Different generations. Different movements. Different expectations. And yet, she paused just long enough to let the silence breathe. You've never really changed your look. It was subtle. But not harmless. Dolly blinked once. Smile intact. Well, she replied lightly, I've always believed if you know who you are deep down, you don't have to chase every trend that comes along. A few approving murmurs from the audience. A soft ripple of support. Joy didn't smile back. But don't you think, she pressed, voice sharpening, there's something fake about that consistency? Big hair. Sparkles. Over-the-top femininity. Some might say it feels outdated. The word hung in the air like frost. Whoopi shifted slightly in her chair. One co-host glanced down at her notes. Dolly didn't flinch. I've always thought femininity wasn't something to apologize for, she answered calmly. It's just one way of being strong. More applause. Louder this time. Joy crossed her arms. Sure, she said, lips tightening. But don't you worry, younger women see that and think success requires all the glitter and glamour. The implication was clearer now. Dolly's fingers rested lightly against the table. Perfect nails tapping once, softly. I think young women are smart enough to decide for themselves what empowers them, she said with quiet conviction. And I trust them more than I trust labels. That line landed. The audience clapped harder. Joy's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm just saying, she continued, brands can hide the real substance underneath all the packaging. There it was. Not curiosity. Not dialogue. An accusation wrapped in intellectual tone. Dolly looked at Joy directly now. Not with anger. With clarity. I think substance speaks for itself, she said evenly. A beat passed. Joy smiled faintly, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Of course. I just think it's worth questioning. Then question away, Dolly replied gently. I've lived my life in the open. Applause again. Joy didn't join it. For a moment, producers behind the cameras shifted uncomfortably. The energy had tilted slightly off balance, but the show attempted to correct itself. Another co-host quickly brought up Dolly's philanthropy again. Safe territory. Over 100 million books distributed. Children across multiple countries. Communities transformed. Dolly spoke with sincerity. No grand gestures. No defensiveness. And yet, Joy was already preparing her next move. You could see it in the way her fingers tapped the mug. In the way she inhaled before speaking. So Dolly, Joy said again, voice newly sharpened, let me ask you something real. The room stilled. Do you ever worry your charity work is part of the brand too? Just another marketing tool? Silence. Not because it was the hardest question ever asked. But because it sounded like a trap. Dolly's smile held. For one extra second. I don't do what I do to look good, she answered calmly. I do it because I remember what it felt like not to have anything. Joy nodded slowly. But charity is convenient for celebrities, isn't it? It creates a shield from criticism. A low murmur rippled through the audience. Dolly's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. If my work helps people, she said, I don't mind if it helps my image too. But that wasn't the purpose. Joy leaned closer. Your whole thing, sweet Dolly, kind Dolly. It's a performance, isn't it? Whoopi inhaled sharply. Dolly nodded thoughtfully. Everything public is a performance to some degree, she said softly. Yours too. A few nervous laughs. Joy's eyes hardened. Mine is honest conversation. Yours is an act. The temperature in the studio dropped again. Holiday lights flickered softly, almost ironically. Dolly's hands folded together again. Joy, she said calmly, I've been called worse than a doll. You're avoiding the point. No, Dolly replied evenly. I'm answering it. Just not the way you hoped. That line shifted something. For the first time, Joy's smile faltered. And somewhere behind the cameras, a producer whispered urgently into a headset. Because this wasn't playful tension anymore. This was calculation versus composure. And neither woman was blinking. Joy leaned back, then forward again, as if reconsidering strategy in real time. Here's the point, she said, voice cutting cleaner now. You present yourself as empowerment. But your image is built around what men wanted women to look like for decades. The words landed heavier than the sequins ever could. Dolly blinked slowly. When she spoke again, the softness remained, but steel had entered the center of it. I didn't build myself to please men, she said. I built myself to survive. The audience erupted. And for a split second, Joy realized something dangerous. Dolly Parton wasn't losing control. She was gaining ground. Joy opened her mouth to fire again, and Dolly raised one polite finger. Not aggressive. Not loud. Just firm. And the studio fell completely silent. Because in that moment, something irreversible had just shifted. And no one, not even the producers frantically gripping their headsets, knew how far this collision was about to go. The silence after Dolly raised her finger did not feel accidental. It felt earned. Holiday lights still glowed. The wreaths still hung perfectly in place. The audience still sat in neat rows under the studio heat. But something invisible had cracked open in the room. The atmosphere no longer felt festive. It felt fragile. Dolly lowered her hand slowly, deliberately, as if setting down something breakable. And before you decide what kind of woman I am, she said gently, her voice no louder than before, you might want to ask yourself something. Joy's lips tightened. What? Dolly's smile returned, but it was different now. Not warm. Not playful. Controlled. When you look at me, she asked softly, do you see a woman who chose her own path, or do you only see what you've been taught to resent? The question did not explode. It sank. The audience didn't gasp immediately. They froze. Because this wasn't an insult. It was a mirror. And mirrors are more dangerous than punches. Joy let out a short laugh, but it wobbled at the edges. Oh, please, she snapped. Resent? I'm just tired of watching grown women play dress-up and calling it empowerment. There it was. The air changed again. A low murmur spread through the audience, confused, uncomfortable. Someone near the back whispered, "Wow," under their breath. One co-host pressed her lips together and looked down at her cue cards as if they suddenly contained emergency instructions. Dolly did not react the way people expected. She didn't gasp. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't fight. She exhaled. A slow, measured breath. And for a fraction of a second, the camera caught it, her jaw tightening just barely before smoothing out again. The kind of reaction only someone watching closely would notice. The kind that reveals effort. Joy, she said evenly, I've never once asked you to like my hair. Or approve of my clothes. Joy shrugged, dismissive. It's hard not to notice. And I've never asked you to approve of my choices, Dolly continued calmly. Then why are you being defensive? Joy fired back instantly. Dolly paused. The pause stretched longer than television usually allows. Long enough for the control room to panic. Long enough for producers to start whispering urgently in headsets. The camera stayed tight on Dolly's face, capturing every flicker of light across her eyes. Because, she said clearly, you're not discussing my choices. You're mocking them. Joy's expression hardened. That's ridiculous. Is it? Dolly asked softly. The studio lights seemed hotter now. The holiday candles behind the desk flickered slightly as someone offstage shifted air. Or is that what bullies say, Dolly continued, still calm, when they get called out? The word hit harder than any raised voice could have. Bullies. Whoopi's eyes widened. One co-host visibly froze mid-movement, her hand suspended above her mug. Joy leaned forward sharply. Don't you dare call me a bully. I'm describing behavior, Dolly replied, voice steady. Not labeling a person. That distinction landed differently. Joy's shoulders stiffened. She leaned closer across the desk, invading Dolly's space without fully crossing it. I ask hard questions, Joy said. That's my job. Hard questions are meant to understand, Dolly answered. Yours are meant to provoke. The audience clapped, hesitantly at first, then stronger. Joy heard it. Her jaw clenched. Inside her mind, calculations were racing. Push further. Back off. Turn it into a joke. She chose escalation. Let's be honest, Joy said, her voice sharper now. You're not the saint people think you are. You're a savvy businesswoman who sold a fantasy so well that people stopped questioning it. A low, collective inhale rippled across the studio. Even the camera operators felt it. Dolly's hands slowly unfolded from each other. She rested her palms flat on the glass table. Not aggressive. Grounded. Her smile faded completely now. Not replaced by anger, replaced by something steadier. Joy, she said softly, you keep speaking as if you know me. I know what you show, Joy shot back. And you keep pushing, Dolly continued evenly, like you're waiting for me to break. The words were quiet. But they hit like a spotlight turning on. Joy blinked. I'm not trying to make you break, she snapped. No. Dolly leaned forward slightly. Just enough. Then why does it feel like you're hoping I will? The audience reacted audibly now. Not applause. A wave of energy. A shift. One co-host attempted to interject. Maybe we should, but Joy cut her off without looking. I'm not done. Producers behind the scenes were now visibly anxious. One whispered, wrap it up, into a headset. Another shook their head. The red recording light stayed on. Dolly sat back slowly. Then ask your question, she said. Joy didn't hesitate. Fine. Here it is. Do you honestly believe dressing like a caricature of femininity is empowering? Or is it just comfortable because it keeps you non-threatening? The temperature dropped again. Caricature. Non-threatening. Words chosen carefully. Words meant to sting. Dolly's eyes sharpened for the first time. I am many things, she replied. But I have never been non-threatening. A ripple of laughter broke through the tension. Nervous but appreciative. Joy pressed harder. You play sweet. You play harmless. That's why people love you. Or, Dolly said calmly, maybe I just don't wake up looking for someone to diminish. The audience reacted louder now. Applause mixed with gasps. Joy's composure slipped for half a second. Just enough for the camera to catch her blinking rapidly. You think I'm diminishing you? She demanded. I think, Dolly answered carefully, that you're uncomfortable with a woman who chose her own version of power. Silence again. This time heavier. Whoopi shifted in her seat. She could feel it tipping too far. But she didn't step in. Not yet. Joy laughed, but it carried no humor. Power. Big hair and rhinestones are power. Dolly's voice stayed measured. Power is knowing who you are when everyone tells you to be something else. The audience stood halfway to their feet before sitting back down, unsure whether to fully commit. Joy's fingers drummed against the table now. Her composure thinning. You're deflecting, she accused. No, Dolly said. I'm refusing to shrink. The words echoed. For a split second, even Joy looked startled by them. The studio felt smaller somehow. The lights brighter. The decorations artificial. The warmth gone. Joy leaned in one last time, voice lowering dangerously. You've built a career on being liked, she said. What happens when people stop liking you? That question hung differently. It wasn't about hair. Or glitter. Or branding. It was personal. Dolly didn't answer immediately. Her eyes moved briefly across the audience. Faces watching. Waiting. Then she looked back at Joy. I survived before I was liked, she said quietly. And I'll survive long after. The control room went silent. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but the audience erupted first. Full applause now. Some people rising to their feet. The energy no longer uncertain. Joy's face flushed. And that's when something unexpected happened. One of the cameras, positioned too close to the table during the escalation, shifted abruptly as an operator adjusted his stance. The base clipped the edge of the desk. A loud, sharp crash echoed across the studio floor. Gasps. Shouts. The holiday candles trembled from the vibration. For one surreal second, everyone thought something worse had happened. The camera tilted sideways, its lens staring at the ceiling lights. Silence. And in that chaos, split second, disorienting, Dolly stood. Not dramatically. Not storming. She simply rose to her feet. The audience quieted immediately. Joy remained seated. Dolly smoothed her sleeves again, the same way she had when she first sat down. And when she spoke, her voice was calm enough to cut through the confusion. I came here for conversation, she said. Not combat. No one moved. Not the crew. Not the hosts. Not even Joy. And I will not let anyone reduce me to something small just to make a point. Her eyes held steady on Joy's. The tension had reached something irreversible now. Because Dolly Parton was no longer absorbing the attack. She was drawing a line. And what happened next, would end the segment in a way no one in that studio would ever forget. The camera still lay tilted on its side. One red recording light blinked against the polished studio floor, reflecting in fractured streaks across the glass desk. The holiday candles behind the hosts flickered unevenly now, disturbed by the sudden crash. For a moment, the entire set looked less like a daytime talk show and more like a stage after a storm. Dolly Parton stood perfectly still. Not trembling. Not flustered. Not angry. Still. Her black sequins caught the light in soft pulses as the audience slowly settled back into their seats. A producer rushed toward the fallen camera, whispering frantically into a headset. Another signaled for the crew to hold position. No commercial break had been called. The red light on the main camera was still on. They were still live. Joy remained seated, her hands gripping the edge of the table now. Her jaw was tight, but her eyes betrayed something new. Uncertainty. Dolly looked at her calmly. I came here for conversation, she repeated softly. Not combat. The words didn't echo. They settled. Joy let out a short breath through her nose. No one's fighting you, she said, though the sharpness in her voice had dulled just slightly. Dolly tilted her head, studying her. Maybe not with fists, she replied. But sometimes words can hit harder. A murmur of agreement moved through the audience. Not loud. But present. Whoopi finally leaned forward, sensing the moment had reached a breaking point. Let's all take a breath, she said carefully. We can disagree without tearing each other down. But Dolly gently raised her hand, not to silence Whoopi, but to signal she wasn't finished. And the entire studio instinctively listened. Joy, Dolly said quietly, her voice steady but no longer sweet, you asked who I am underneath all this. She gestured lightly to her hair, her sequins, the glamour. I'm the same woman who grew up in a one-room cabin with 11 siblings. I'm the same woman who watched her mama sew clothes from flour sacks. I'm the same woman who learned early that if you don't define yourself, the world will do it for you. The room had gone completely silent again. This wasn't a defensive speech. It was testimony. I built this look, she continued, because when I first came to Nashville, people laughed at me anyway. They said I was too country. Too blonde. Too loud. So I thought, if they're going to laugh, I might as well give them something worth looking at. A small ripple of soft laughter broke through the tension. Joy's expression flickered. Just briefly. But what they didn't see, Dolly went on, was the work. The writing. The late nights. The contracts I read myself. The decisions I made when no one thought I could. She stepped slightly away from the table now, not retreating, but repositioning. Standing taller. You call it a performance, she said gently. I call it armor. That word changed everything. Armor. The audience reacted instantly, soft gasps, a few claps beginning to build. Joy's lips parted, but nothing came out immediately. Dolly wasn't finished. Do you know how many times people tried to reduce me to a punchline? She asked quietly. How many interviews started with jokes about my body before they ever asked about my music? The silence was heavy now. Not tense, reflective. I learned a long time ago, Dolly continued, that you can either fight every insult head-on, or you can rise above it and let your work speak. Joy swallowed. And if that makes me look sweet, Dolly said, then I'll take sweet over bitter any day. The audience erupted. Not explosive. Not chaotic. But powerful. Applause rolled across the studio like thunder building in waves. A few people stood fully this time. No hesitation. Joy remained seated. The camera operators had righted the fallen equipment now, but no one dared interrupt. The control room was silent. Producers, moments ago frantic, were now watching something they knew would become television history. Joy cleared her throat. I wasn't trying to insult you. I know, Dolly replied softly. The unexpected gentleness in that answer landed harder than anger ever could. You weren't trying to insult me, Dolly continued. You were trying to challenge me. Joy nodded slightly, relieved to find footing. But there's a difference, Dolly said calmly, between challenging someone, and dismissing who they are. That line lingered. Joy's shoulders lowered a fraction. Not surrender. Not apology. But recognition. You think I dismissed you? She asked quietly. Dolly didn't hesitate. I think you looked at me, she said, and decided what I represent before asking what I've endured. No one moved. The holiday decorations no longer felt ironic. They felt distant. As if the warmth in the room had shifted away from decor and into something human. Joy leaned back slowly in her chair. For the first time all morning, she wasn't preparing her next question. She was listening. The audience sensed it too. The energy changed. No longer a battle. A reckoning. You're right about one thing, Dolly said after a pause. Everything public has an element of performance. Even this. She gestured lightly between them. But performance doesn't mean fake. It means intentional. Joy exhaled slowly. And I have always been intentional, Dolly added. A long beat passed. Then something no one expected happened. Joy nodded. Not dramatically. Not theatrically. Just once. I can respect that, she admitted quietly. A murmur of surprise moved through the audience. Whoopi leaned back, relief washing across her face. One co-host finally smiled again. Dolly's expression softened, genuinely this time. I don't mind hard questions, she said. I mind questions that assume I owe an apology for being comfortable in my own skin. Joy let out a small, almost self-aware laugh. I suppose I came in hot. A few scattered chuckles from the crowd. Dolly's smile returned fully now, the warmth people recognized instantly. Fire can be useful, she replied. It just depends on what you're trying to burn. The audience clapped again. The tension had not disappeared, but it had transformed. Joy looked down at her mug for a moment before meeting Dolly's eyes again. For what it's worth, she said, I don't resent you. Dolly tilted her head playfully. Good. I'd hate to think my hair had that much power. Laughter finally filled the room, real laughter this time. Not nervous. Not forced. Even Joy smiled. The storm had passed. But what made the moment unforgettable wasn't that Dolly stayed calm. It was that she stayed herself. She hadn't shouted. Hadn't stormed off. Hadn't retaliated with cruelty. She had drawn a line without raising her voice. She had defended her identity without attacking someone else's. That kind of strength doesn't trend easily. But it lingers. As the segment wrapped, Whoopi thanked Dolly warmly. The applause this time was unanimous, every single person on their feet. Even Joy stood. Dolly placed her hand over her heart once more, eyes shining under the studio lights. "Thank y'all," she said softly. And when she walked off that set, she didn't look like someone who had survived an ambush. She looked like someone who had faced it, and refused to become smaller because of it. Backstage, crew members exchanged glances they would talk about for years. Producers exhaled deeply. Social media would explode within minutes. Clips would circulate. Opinions would divide. But one thing would be undeniable. Grace had outmatched aggression. Composure had disarmed confrontation. And sweetness, when rooted in self-respect, had proven far stronger than anyone expected. Because sometimes the most powerful mic drop isn't loud at all. It's quiet. And unforgettable. If you felt that moment, if you believe strength doesn't have to shout to be heard, make sure you like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that pull back the curtain on the moments television doesn't forget. And share this with someone who needs the reminder that staying true to yourself is the boldest move of all. We'll see you in the next one.